All right, and Ian Trottier for Discussions of Truth. Look, if you happen to be tuning in live, then thanks. Consider yourself lucky as far as I'm concerned. What a show coming up here today, jam-packed. Normal slot, 5 o'clock Eastern. And, look, Carla Spalding is scheduled to join. I've just got to get her in. Jason Mariner, who was recently endorsed. Let's see. He was endorsed by. Slipping my mind here. Let me get this for you. Newt Gingrich, I think, recently endorsed. Jason Mariner, Rudy Reyes. It's on the slate here. I just finished a special edition Sunday, and by the way, Saturday night, I joined the gentleman over at Earth Radio Network for a 2-hour interview. You can find that interview on their Rumble channel, unless it's still up. I haven't checked the one I did with them, but it was a few days ago when I checked. Earth Radio Network. 2-hour. And what I discussed with them was a recent article, and I'll run through this real quick before we bring on today's first guest, Mark Shaw. What I discussed with them was a recent article that I'd written and released last weekend. So that was Saturday night, and then Sunday I did a doubleheader. I brought on Dean Roeder to speak on his research of the American Nazi involvement. And if you are familiar with my programs, you're likely familiar with the Nazi involvement, or the American involvement in Nazi Germany. American companies did indeed fund the Hitler regime. The untold story of America's deal with the devil, the hidden Nazi. And Dan had some really nice things to say. I have received these compliments before. Maybe it's a knack that I have. I don't know. I didn't start out. I didn't start out in my. I think I had just turned 40. I didn't start out in my late 30s thinking, oh, I'm gonna start a radio show or a podcast or. It never crossed my mind. I'd done various things. I'd built a valet parking business. And in fact, if you're in New York, next time you're in New York City, you see iPark. That's my name. That's my company by name. Imperial Parking bought that from me in 2012, maybe it was. Yeah, 13, I think, something like that. iPark, and I started that in San Francisco, as a matter of fact. Anyway, I've done various things. I never saw myself doing a talk show or a radio show or being an interviewer. But this happened, Discussions of Truth, you're listening to it because of a woman named Kitty. And I'd picked her up. I was given a lift. I picked her up in a lift. I gave her a ride, literally the lift, the company. Giving her a ride from South Beach over to Coconut Grove. And I had just stopped working for a guy, but that led me anyway. So she says, "Yeah, Ian, this research that you've done on the Zika virus just blows me away. Would you come into the online radio station that we have in Wynwood?" I says, "Yeah, of course." She says, "I want you to talk about this stuff," and that just developed into a weekly show because the information I was uncovering, I became so passionate about it. I knew I knew it was getting squashed, and then I began getting, Mark, or today's first guest. I was looking at the archive. He joined Discussions of Truth October of within the, I think it was the first year. He was one of the first guests of the show. But every week, and John Kiriakou, former CIA agent, Ray McGovern, Dr. Tenpenny, these voices that were being squashed by mainstream media is what the show was attracting. And I'd reach out to these people, and they gladly came because they needed an outlet. Nothing has changed today, folks. Nothing's different. In fact, it's only getting worse. In the sense of mainstream media is getting worse. But I think there is a growing market for the alternative voice. Because people now are realizing the Department of Education is corrupt, and public schooling it's getting to the point of becoming ridiculous. But this is what happens. This is how great nations become divided. You weaken, right? You create order out of chaos. Anyway, so Dean had some really nice. Again, he's an attorney. He's a practicing attorney. Another invitation. He was invited to get involved in this story, the hidden Nazi. But he had some really nice things to say about his time with me. This was this past Sunday. He said, "You're a great interviewer. Thank you very much, Dean. And I've done hundreds of these," he says. "You've asked some questions I've never gotten before. You probe well," he says, "and follow up well. And I compliment you on that." Again, I didn't ever set out. People say, "Oh, you do great journalism." It's not journalism to me. It's not journalism. It's almost like detective or investigative work. It's examining. And I started this website called Citizen Examiner because of it. I just bought the domain. I thought, that's kind of what it is. It's a citizen examination, because you're a citizen, you're civilian of this country. And it's our duty. It's our duty to hold these quasi-elected politicians, to hold them to the bar that we want them to sit on. Right? We want to set them out. We want to set the bar for them. And we have to set that bar for them. And if we just let them run wild with the tax dollars like they do, Biden, Harris, these people, this is ridiculous. Pelosi, come on. It's getting a little out of control, guys. America is what I'm saying. You, listener, So, anyway, out of necessity, out of invitation, and then a seen necessity, the program continues. I do this not for me. I do this not for me. This does not make me money. This does not make me. I do this because the country is falling, folks. I do this because I'm standing up for. So I guess I am doing it for me. I'm standing up for freedom. I'm standing up for my own freedom. I'm standing up for my own freedom, and I'm urging you to do the same. So I guess I am doing it for me. I retract on that. I am doing this for me. As much as I'm doing it for you, I'm doing it for me. But I'm doing it for you. Because all I'm doing, and I'm doing it for all the people. If you go to my website, iantrottier.com, trottier.com, and you click on the research tab, please just grab all of that information, grab all that literature, copy, paste it, put it somewhere else, spread it around. This is all free information. PDFs are all free. There's no charge. And I've gathered this over the past 5 years, folks. And so I do it for the people that have written those books, that tried to get that information on and out to the masses and to the public. That's why I do it, because there's corruption. We seek out to destroy. We seek out corruption, and we seek to destroy it. So I open up with Metallica. I've written to them asking for permission to get the authorization to use their work, but I haven't received word back, and I'll keep using it and if they tell me not to use it anymore. But that's the premise of that book. So that song. So later in the day, after Dean Ruder, I had on I had on Lucas Wall. I apologize, Lucas, if you listen to this. I mispronounced your name. I'm calling you Hall. Lucas has been written up a number of times in Business Insider. He's suing the Biden administration and the CDC and TSA. And in fact, I think that case should be going to the Supreme Court this week. And I had Josh Yoder come on the show. as a guest to kind of provide his counsel. So that hour included that Sunday, a special edition Sunday, and I'm starting to do these more and more. This week I've got going to do another special edition, folks. I'm going to do another special show, and Lisa Logan out of the state of Utah, working to uphold some of this integrity, uphold some of the integrity, if you will, in public education. Fighting some of these ridiculous race-based theoretical approaches to education, which I find absurd. I find it totally absurd. I simply do. Yeah, I was in public schools as a youngster in Northern California. We never, at that age in elementary school, we never saw differences. I mean, just me. Maybe you have a different experience, but we never did. We had black friends, we had Chinese friends, we had Asian friends, whatever it may be. We all loved each other. We all cared for each other. We all played on the same field. We never had any of these ridiculous divides today. And I contend, folks, this is not an American thing. This whole race card, this is coming from a tyrannic banking system that's seeking to destroy the United States and its Constitution, because it's the Constitution that makes the great economy. It just is. It's the free trade. The Constitution, it provides a level playing field, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, and that's what makes a flourishing. Argue back. Great. Go ahead and argue that. Yeah, you can't. You can't. I mean, the Chinese, the Russians, communism has not worked for any nation. The U.S. Constitution is the greatest governing document ever written by man. Period. Pardon me, a sip of liquid there. Yeah, that's okay. Fine, that's my opinion, and it's also my opinion based off of plenty of research that there is a European-based central banking machine that is tearing down this country, and they're aiming at the Constitution. And you look at the history of the country; they've been doing it since day one. That gets back to, before we bring on Mark, and I know you're standing by. That gets back to. That gets back to the very first flag of the U.S. colonial flag that Washington and Franklin approved on. That flag is the British East Indies Company flag, which means that the premise upon which America found its independence in 1776, July 4th, was based off of banking control. I don't necessarily make that argument, but I reveal some pretty interesting findings in that article. It's titled "Remember the Alamo," because what was it, last week, 2 weeks ago, I was in San Antonio, and my good friend took a video of me, and that turned out to a great video, and I explained some missing. This is the same banking machine out of Europe that is controlling the United States today. That's my argument, and it's hard not to argue against that, folks. It's hard to argue against that, because you're unable to prove, just as Anthony Sabatini said on the show 4 weeks ago, the Federal Reserve is unconstitutional and needs to be repealed. Unless you can show me who the shareholders are of the Federal Reserve and who that has the best interest of, because it doesn't have the best interest of you, the people, we, the people, which makes all of us, entonces, I was thinking Spanish there, I do speak a little Spanish, which makes all of us economic slaves to this banking system. Okay, and the second hour, I'm going to bring on Mark right now. In the second hour, folks, we're going to bring on Peter McCullough. So Peter McCullough will be joining us in about an hour. He's going to come on at the 6:30 Eastern slot. We're about 5:20 right now, running late with Mark. And then late, the last time, doing 3 hours. I'm doing 3 hours here today. Yeah, John O'Connor is a lawyer, a former assistant U.S. Attorney General. No, not Attorney General. What was his title? Not Attorney General. Anyway, he's assistant. He's a federal assistant federal lawyer. I don't recall the title right now. We're going to bring him on and talk about his thoughts on the Rittenhouse issue and some of the other work that he's working on. He's a big deal. You're going to like that one as well. So John O'Connor will be joining us the third hour. We're going to bring on Mark Shaw right now. Mark Shaw this will be I believe the fourth time Mark has joined the show. Great author and lawyer himself. Mark Shaw, ladies and gentlemen. Calling Mark Shaw. But it got, let's see, I may have to bring him in on Skype. Yeah, this is the issue that I have with, see, Skype's got a poor connection, and then right now, see, I don't have a strong cell connection. I got a strong Wi-Fi connection, but I got a weak. Oh, here we go. Mark. Okay, let's see here. Hold on a second. Mark, can you hear me? Okay. All right, I could not hear Mark, and that is. I'm going to run a quick test here, quick sound test. I'm going to continue with seek and destroy. Make sure that picks it up. No. Okay, so there's a. Let's see. There's an issue here with this equipment, but I appreciate. What have I done here? What have I done? Let's see. Something going on with my. All right, let me run another sound test. It came out great. There we are. Okay, so we should be good here. I got this sound check. Okay, we should be good here to bring on Mark Shaw. Mark Shaw, ladies and gentlemen, you're gonna dial him in again. See that he answers here. Should we get this going here? Apologize for the. Here we go. There we go.
Yes, hello.
Gotcha this time, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. You're a busy man.
Mark, it's I was looking back at the email threads that you and I had, and it seems that you first appeared on this program October of 2017.
Really? Wow.
And this is now your fourth, maybe fourth time joining the program. You and I you go back a ways, and since starting this, Mark, it's just it's really picked up within the past year. The work that I'm doing here has really picked up within the last year.
I'm glad for you. I really am. You're a good man, and I'm glad to hear that for sure. Good.
Mark, you're busy as well, and you keep digging into the Dorothy Kilgallen. Let's get into update. Well, if listeners aren't familiar with your work, I think it's fair. Please give an introduction to who you are.
Well, thanks. I'm a really blessed man. Tomorrow will be it's hard to believe, it'll be my 76th Thanksgiving, I was thinking this morning. So I'm very blessed to be alive at this age and in good health and all of that. But I never intended to be an author, Ian. I was a poor student at Purdue University, which is archiving my body of work now, which means a lot to me. But I was a terrible student there, and then not even a very good student in law school. But since then, I've been very fortunate with things. I became a criminal defense lawyer of some note, and then a legal analyst for the Tyson and Kobe Bryant and O.J. Simpson cases and all of that. And then I began writing my books in 1992, and the first one was a biography of Mike Tyson at his trial. I covered that for the networks and for USA Today. And that was my first book. I was very upset with the verdict in that case. I didn't think there was any evidence against him. And I've just been publishing one book after another. I think next year will be about 30 years of doing this and almost 30 books. They say I'm a prolific author, which is nice to hear. But everything changed in 2006 when I began writing a book about Melvin Belli, the attorney for Jack Ruby, who, as we all know, saw on television, shot Lee Harvey Oswald just after the JFK assassination in 1963. And so I knew Mr. Belli from practicing law with him in San Francisco in the 1980s. And I was very quizzical, Ian, as I know you would be as a curious guy, how he became Ruby's lawyer, because he was a personal injury lawyer, and then how he defended him with some ludicrous psychomotor epilepsy defense that made no sense to anybody, including the jury, wouldn't let Ruby testify and all of that. And so what I found out about Belli and his main client at the time was a mafioso named Mickey Cohen made me really curious about what had happened, how Belli became Ruby's attorney, and then I began looking into that whole situation and went back to the 1960 election and on to then coming in contact with Dorothy Kilgallen, who was the most credible reporter about the JFK assassination, because unlike me and all the other authors and experts and everything who've written about the JFK assassination, Dorothy was actually there at the Ruby trial. the only one who interviewed Jack Ruby. And so taking her research and including it with mine, I've written the books, first of all, the Poison Patriarch about Joe Kennedy in the 1960 election, then the bestseller, The Reporter Who Knew Too Much, about Dorothy's investigation of the JFK assassination, then Denial of Justice, that exposed the Ruby trial transcripts for the first time and showed that Ruby was part of a plot to kill the president, and the new one, Collateral Damage, which for the first time I looked at something nobody else had done. I looked at the JFK assassination in context with the mysterious deaths of Marilyn Monroe in 1962 and Dorothy Kilgallen in 1965. You have to realize they died within 40 months of each other. And based on my research, which was a little ass backwards, frankly, because I looked at Dorothy Kilgallen's, looked at the JFK assassination first. That was 63. Then Dorothy Kilgallen's death and her investigation in 65, and then Marilyn in 62. But it really opens up exactly what happened with the JFK assassination, which of course we celebrated with not celebrated, but the 58th anniversary was yesterday. And it really opens up everything because when you look at it that way, it changes what we've known about the JFK assassination because each of the three deaths are connected for the first time in Collateral Damage.
That's amazing how you've been able to connect those. I want to get your opinion on this, and I think the last time you were on the show, I'm just going to throw this out there. I've recently had on this theologian. Within the past 6 months, he joined my show. I find intrigue in the work that he does. His name is Eric John Phelps. I think I may have sent you one of his books, but I come across this photo, and it's got JFK and Richard Nixon standing at a dinner in the Waldorf Astoria. It's called the Alfred E. Smith Memorial Dinner, New York City, 1960. It's got Nixon and Kennedy looking at each other, and then in the middle of the two of them is a man named Francis. Let's get this here. It's Francis Cardinal Spellman. And so,
yes.
What can you say about this character, Mark?
Well, it's pretty fascinating, really, that you would bring that up. I'm amazed sometimes how these happened. I'm reading a book right now called The Pope and Mussolini, and it goes back to just before World War II, and it's just disturbing in nature about how the Vatican and the Catholic Church basically were enablers with Mussolini taking power, and then of course Mussolini, and Hitler and all of that. And so the reason I bring it up is because even the American Catholic clergy pandered to Mussolini and even to Hitler at times as they were killing 6 million people and all of that. And one of them was Cardinal Spellman in New York City. And for him to be between JFK and Nixon is not a surprise, because I will tell you, both of them were very flawed men, for sure. The 1960 election, and this is what I've used as the foundation for my 5 books that touch on the assassination. The 1960 election, you probably know, was going to be very close between Nixon and Kennedy. And Joe Kennedy, who was the smart guy and who also pacified Adolf Hitler before the war, he knew they were going to lose that election unless they won West Virginia and Illinois. And that's a known fact and been corroborated several times. And so what did he do? Well, he went to some of his friends in the underworld that he knew through Sam Giancana and Frank Sinatra and all of that, and have them help him win the 1960 election. And, that was basically, going ahead and using fraud to win that particular election. And, of course, when Bobby Kennedy was appointed Attorney General, he went after those mafioso, especially Carlos Marcello, who I've proven orchestrated the JFK assassination. But in the middle of all that, you've got the Kennedy family as the beacon of Catholicism. They're this this family that worships God and is trying to live up to Christian beliefs and all of that, when really they're not like that at all. And they were heavily involved with Cardinal Spellman. Dorothy Kilgallen knew him there were a lot of people who knew Spellman and knew that he was not what he appeared to be, that he was actually wearing a mask and all that. So I think that's very interesting that you bring that up. And of course, we know about Richard Nixon's flaws and him, what he did when he got in office and everything. So that's a fascinating photo. I've never seen it before, and I'm just anxious to take a look at it. So I'll track it down and take a look. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem. And this Nazi thing, you're talking about Mussolini, but this Nazi issue keeps coming up, and it's interesting how it does resurface. Sunday, I did a special edition with a guy named Dean Reuter, and he's also an attorney, Mark. But his book called "The Hidden Nazi: The Untold Story of America's Deal with the Devil." This is when I first started the show. I based it off of a lot of the research done by a guy named Anthony Sutton that that was a Hoover Fellow at Stanford, and he had written extensively about some of the corruption in the banking system in the United States and connecting the Bush family, Prescott Bush mainly, and some of these other connections. He even went as far as writing a book called something about Wall Street funding the Bolshevik Revolution. What is it that you have found here? November 22nd, as you alluded to, Mark. I've been in Dallas within the past 6 months, and I was at a conference there, just a few blocks from Dealey Plaza. I'm supposed to be back in Dallas here in a couple weeks for another conference. November 22nd is an important date because as we the tax-paying citizens, the civilians, as we try to hold our government accountable for mischievous or inappropriate activity, here we've got today, and you've dedicated the last number of years here of your life in regards to Dorothy Kilgallen. What can you say about this assassination, Mark? Where are you at right now in regards to your research? And I know you don't focus necessarily on his assassination, but update listeners as to where you're at in regards to that.
Well, it's people say, why is this all relevant? Maybe you get that question as well. All this happened almost 60 years ago. Well, it's relevant in my opinion, Ian, because they didn't ask the right questions back there. In fact, they didn't ask any questions. When JFK was killed and J. Edgar Hoover shouted Oswald alone, Oswald alone, Oswald alone to the world, nobody except Dorothy Kilgallen, frankly, with her stature as the most powerful female voice in America and her columns and everything, this revered reporter, she wrote columns, the Oswald file must not close and all that. She was the only one who really asked questions, but the public didn't. They swallowed hook, line, and sinker everything that everything he said about JFK's death. And so that bothered me. And with Dorothy Kilgallen, when she died in 1965, of an alleged overdose of drugs. I've proven that was not an overdose. She was too close to the truth. She was writing a book for Random House and exposed Marcello, who had the greatest motive to have killed JFK, so Bobby Kennedy would be powerless and not come after him and the other mafioso. She died in 1965 when she got too close to the truth, and I've proved that she was murdered. If you go back to 1962, Marilyn Monroe, I've proven in Collateral Damage, the new book, had no reason really to have committed suicide. Dorothy wrote columns about how well she was doing, and she had found a romantic interest with a bigger name than Joe DiMaggio, her second husband. That landed me on Bobby Kennedy, and I prove in Collateral Damage that he had a torrid love affair with her in 1962, and when she threatened to go to the media about that and matters of national security that Bobby had leaked to her, they had to silence her. Nobody really asked questions about Marilyn Monroe's death. And so I think that's the relevance here. And nobody has ever looked at what I have, and that is in this particular book, putting it all together and saying, all right, if you look at these three deaths in the context of the JFK assassination, you will realize this point. And you have to kind of swallow it in short doses, but basically if Bobby Kennedy, Ian, would have been prosecuted for Marilyn Monroe's death in 1962, based on the mountains of evidence there, and it had not been covered up as it was, then he would have been powerless. He would have had to have resigned as Attorney General, and that means that those enemies of his, like Marcello and others, would not have had to kill JFK to render him powerless. He would have already been powerless, and so there would have been no JFK assassination. And you can go further into 1965 because Dorothy Kilgallen would not have had to been silenced because there would have been no JFK assassination for her to investigate. So that really changes the course of history if you look at it. And the fact that there are these cover-ups as we go on through history, in Marilyn's death, in JFK's death, and now and of course in Dorothy Kilgallen's death, but it goes to today. And I know you're aware of the fact that President Biden, a couple of weeks ago said, well, no, we can't give you the JFK assassination documents again. And it was just shocking to me because, as you know, if you go back to the most recent former president, Trump, and then Obama, and then the Bushes and Clinton and everything, they always use matters of national security as the reason why the American people can't know about this. But he took it to another level with an inane excuse, saying that it would protect if they released it. We can't release it because it protects against identifiable harm to the military defense, intelligence operations, law enforcement, or the conduct of foreign relations. What in the world can anything in those documents have to do with those subjects? It's just a lame excuse again. And I know you feel like I do. This is why people do not trust the government anymore, because these kinds of lack of transparency make us really wonder what the heck's going on back there in Washington.
I was not aware that Biden had made that comment, and it seemed like when Trump had gotten in the office, he released, 5,000 pages, but revealed very little.
Exactly.
And I wasn't sure I wasn't aware that Biden was continuing with this. Mark, what's being covered up here? What do national security at stake? What could be so severe? What could be so squashed here that could expose blow the lid off of things? What are your thoughts, Mark?
Well, I think people lose their common sense at times with regard to looking into things. I know there's all these theories out there about how JFK died and Marilyn died and Dorothy died and Bobby Kennedy in 68 died and everything. But you got to use common sense, and you got to look at motive in all of this. And in Collateral Damage, I really focus on all of that, and that's how I'm able to connect these three individuals who should not have died at an early age. Marilyn at 36, JFK at 46, and Dorothy at 52. They should not have died, but nobody asked the right questions, and there were the cover-ups and everything. And so now we get into Biden's excuse to not give us these documents, and it's just beyond my imagination as what can be in there that can cause any problems 58 years later. I'm a little bit skeptical when the documents, if they are released, may very much follow what was in the Warren Commission report, which has been lambasted through the years as being completely fraudulent. So that may happen, but what you have to do these days is people like you have to continue to try to promote the truth and have reliable and primary source witnesses on, as I do in my books, and we have to do that to try to get people to stop and think about all of these things, and be careful not to just take things at face value, whether it's internet information or it's local newscasts or it's things coming from the president's office or wherever it is in our own neighborhoods. We have to ask questions, because the right questions weren't asked back in the early 1960s for sure.
Mark, you've proven that Kilgallen did not die of barbiturates and she was murdered. You've proven that. Isn't that accurate? I mean, we've spoken now at least 4 times. We've met one-on-one. That's proven. Go ahead.
Well, what I'm saying is that you have to watch being too close to the truth. I mean, basically, with this particular book, yes, I've had a lot of strange emails. My email's been hacked, my Facebook page, all of that, with people saying, Mark, leave the Kennedys alone. We want to remember Camelot and all that. Well, Bobby Kennedy needs to be held accountable for Marilyn Monroe's death, and I've proven that beyond a reasonable doubt. I lay it out, the evidence for the prosecutors, like you would do with a prosecutor would do at trial. And it's the same thing with Dorothy's death. I had a chance to talk to Dr. Michael Bodden, the famous forensic scientist, and I on a radio show, and I stunned him by saying, your name is on Dorothy Kilgallen's autopsy. He said, what? I said, yeah. and you're the one that gave the news to the media that she died of an overdose. And he said, well, no, Mark, we shouldn't have done that. We didn't know what happened to her.
Wow.
And the same thing happened with Marilyn's death. You know, they just covered it up with Bobby's friend, the L.A. police chief. When I've proved he was in L.A. on the day she died. I've proven through a CIA document this torrid love affair. But nobody asked questions, you see, because they just brushed over all of that. And that's not what we need to do today. We need to ask the right questions, as I say.
What's the most pressing question any listener listening to this, Mark? What do they need to start demanding? What is the question that you recommend listeners start asking now?
Well, I think with regard to the three deaths that I, connect in the book, with Marilyn Monroe, you can find my presentations and interviews up on YouTube. I think there's almost 3.5 million of them now up there, and you can go in and look at the presentations. You don't have to buy the book. And ask yourself, when you use common sense about exactly what Marilyn was going through just before she died in August of 1962, is this the woman, as Dorothy Kilgallen wrote, who would commit suicide at that point? She had everything going for her. She had new movie offers. She was going to remarry Joe DiMaggio. She was so happy. She just had her first home, all of that. And I humanize all three of these characters in Collateral Damage so people can understand what we lost and what they lost when they died at an early age. Ask about Dorothy Kilgallen's death and why the New York District Attorney stopped the investigation in her death that he began. Ask why the New York Police Department Commissioner Dermot Shea, that I met with in New York and shook my hand and said, I will look into Dorothy Kilgallen's death, has not done so. Look into the whole situation with regard to the JFK assassination and why the documents are not being released. Ask your congressman, ask your senator. Get those damn things released so we can figure out if any evidence in there really makes a difference as to what happened to him in 1963.
Mark, 4 weeks ago, it's been 4 weeks now, and I'm just going to throw this out here to you. I want to get your reaction. Anthony Sabatini is a young politician in Florida. Yeah, he holds a representative seat, and he's running for the federal seat, Congress. Great young guy. University of Florida, JD. And he says on my show, Mark, he says, Ian, he says the Federal Reserve Central Bank of the United States is unconstitutional and it needs to be revealed. Well, what we know is we look back, those of us who look at the JFK assassination, and you've done incredible work with Dorothy Kilgallen and tying it into Marilyn Monroe, and I never saw that. I mean, I knew JFK and Monroe, but I never went down that road and made those connections that you have. But is there something financial that's possibly being covered up here in your view, Mark?
Mm-hmm. Well, you always have to look when you're looking at motive. What do they say? Well, when you find there's a murder, you look at jealousy, you look at these other motives that can be possible. But in many ways, it all comes down to looking at the financial end of all this. I will tell you that I just found and I have a lot of respect for a guy like Anthony who's looking into some of this, because at the bottom line is that it has an awful lot to do with financial aspects. And I just found another FBI file on Carlos Marcello in New Orleans, showing that his net worth in 1963 to 65 was something in the neighborhood of about $30 million, which in those days that might have been $1 billion. Well, he had the strongest motive to have eliminated JFK so Bobby would be powerless, because Bobby Kennedy was going to he charged him with racketeering. He was going to deport him again, and all of that. And so there's a financial connection there to what Marcello did. And I know there are these people, and I wish there would be more of them, who would look into an awful lot of these financial connections. I've recently been contacted by someone who's told me about taking it all the way back to World War I and World War II, with who financed an awful lot of the aggression there. And even in the book I just told you about, the Pope and Mussolini, where did the money come from? Well, it was Henry Ford's trucks that were used in World War II, and there were pacifiers like Joe Kennedy and all that money. There was something called the Union Bank that financed a lot of that. The United States has dirty hands with regard to an awful lot of that happened back then. So I really welcome those kinds of investigations. It's not something I've spent too much time on, but I really applaud those that are doing that.
I had recently written an article, Mark, on some information that I had come across, and that there was something called a Flag Committee in 1775 in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Franklin was the chair, and Washington and two other people. But there was a European that went unidentified at that meeting, and he was alluded to as the professor. There's various thoughts as to who that person was, but what we do know is that out of 1775, that meeting, the flag, the first colonial flag that later became known as Betsy Ross's Star Spangled Banner, it had flags on it, had the 13 stripes, but this initial flag had crosses on it. And it's basically the same flag that the Union Jack, and in fact, Buckminster Fuller is quoted as saying, "Hey, this flag's been used for 100 years. I've seen it, Queen Elizabeth using it. This is the flag of the British East Indies Company, Mark. So it's very possible, like you're saying, that America has been doing some dirty economic work for many years. What do you start to work on now, Mark? Tell listeners what you're working on. What's this newest book that you're tackling? Are you writing a newest book? And update listeners as to this movie deal that you've got going.
Yeah.
How's that developed?
Well, I would encourage people to remember the motto over here that I have on my wall on my writing table. The dead cannot cry out for justice. It is the duty of the living to do so for them. And I've dedicated almost 15 years into looking into these important deaths in our nation's history. And it is all about history. You are all about history. Anthony should be all about history. That's really important because we have to watch out for distortions of history. I will tell you, this whole Oswald alone theory, perpetuated, for instance, now by the Sixth Floor Museum at Daley Plaza. It's a shrine to Lee Harvey Oswald, even though at least 80% of the American people believe that never happened. They continue to distort history. And so I think we have to be people who take the risk, and we're going to get abuse for it and all of that, to try to find these distortions of history and rectify them. I'm very fortunate that about a month ago it was announced by the Academy Award nominated actor-producer Mark Wahlberg's production company in Hollywood. They have optioned the media rights to Collateral Damage with the intention of producing a documentary film based on my research with the three subjects in Collateral Damage. And what I hope that will do is present what I think is as close to the truth about what happened to the three of them, as well as really trigger investigations by the New York DA or the police commissioner or by the L.A. District Attorney George Gaston, who I sent a copy of Collateral Damage to, a 375-page evidence report to on the death of Marilyn, asking him to reinvestigate, and I haven't heard from him. So hopefully the visuals that we will have, and people can go to Google and find the announcement of that documentary. I hope that'll make a difference, because we really need to be able to have people stop and think about these instances in history, and go back in history like you're talking about doing, because yes, the United States always tries to seems like, don't they, try to come off as a goody two-shoes nation, but we've been at the thick of problems that have caused an awful lot of issues since way back when.
Yeah, and as Dean Ruder has alluded to, America's been maybe had a deal with the devil for many years. I mean, that's just quoting his work. Okay, this is great to hear, the Mark Wahlberg angle. And where do you go from here, Mark? Where do you go from here?
Well, I really believe that there's the early 1960s were a very, very tragic, sad, dangerous time. We not only lost Marilyn, we lost JFK, we lost Malcolm X, and others during that time, and then Dorothy Kilgallen, and then in 1968 Robert Kennedy was assassinated. I truly believe that at some point I'm going to be able to connect the Bobby Kennedy death to Carlos Marcello as well. And again, it goes back to motive because, Bobby Kennedy basically admitted when JFK died that he knew it was Marcello who had orchestrated the JFK assassination, which is common sense. And he told several of his associates that. So if you're Marcello and you've got this billion-dollar empire that stretches on to Dallas, and Dorothy Kilgallen had proven that there was a connection between Marcello, Jack Ruby, and Oswald, and I've confirmed all that in Collateral Damage. If you're him and you know that you got away with murder, let's say, basically, with JFK, and now, wait a minute, Bobby Kennedy is going to become President of the United States in 1968. Do you want that to happen? Because Bobby was telling everybody, that Marcello was involved and orchestrated JFK's death. You don't want Bobby Kennedy coming back at you when he becomes president, and predictably, he probably would have. So I'm really looking into the connection between Marcello and what happened to Bobby Kennedy in '68. This whole thing with Sirhan Sirhan is a real puzzle, confusing puzzle. It's gotten in the news. Bobby Kennedy Jr. is now approval of the parole of him, but that whole situation has never been revealed. I think in a manner conducive to good research, and so I'm going to work on that a bit in the coming days.
And let's go back for a minute. This makes me think of a comment somebody had recently mentioned to me. You're talking about Illinois in that as a swing state in that election, the Kennedy election.
Right.
Have you seen any evidence of voter fraud dating back to that election? And the reason I say this, Mark, is because a book that's recently come my way, it's called Voter Scam, written by two brothers, I believe it is, Collier, Collier, and they allude to a news group that has colluded with IBM technology and maybe IBM itself. I haven't gone through the book. It's called Voter Scam or Vote Scam, and they're saying that the presidential elections, and this is written back in the 80s, Mark. They're saying the presidential elections were rigged dating back to LBJ. Do you see anything in this Kennedy election?
Well, yes, I do, and I'm not surprised at some of that. We try to do the best we can, I think, with regard to the elections, and there's always going to be issues and all of that. But if you go back to the '60 election especially, that was very, very close between Nixon and Kennedy. And right in the middle of that, basically how that happened is Joe Kennedy knew they were going to lose those two states, but especially Illinois. So he uses Frank Sinatra and his connection to Sam Giancana, who's the Chicago gangster there. And so he brings in those guys to help him win the election, tells them he's going to leave them alone when they get in the White House. If they help them win, they win. Then they sick Bobby Kennedy after them. But at the middle of all of that was maybe the most corrupt mayor in American history, Mayor Daley. And my research has showed, and I think it's been proven through the years, that there were people who voted twice and who shouldn't have voted at all and everything else like that. And so, I think it happens. And unfortunately, then, you have the kind of situation where that's covered up very well. The Republicans in that particular race never objected really too much to it. And so John F. Kennedy became President of the United States. And I'll tell you another thing that I truly believe, and be interested in your opinion about this, but there is something, as you know, called the Kennedy curse. And if you look at that family through the years, I mean, the number of tragedies, deaths, whatever it may be, going to, Ted Kennedy with what happened with Chappaquiddick, and JFK Jr. dying, Jack Kennedy dying, Bobby Kennedy dying. They've had all of these terrible things happen within the Kennedys. And hats off to people who want to still believe in the Kennedy, family and all of that. But they were bad people, and you get what you deserve in life with all that karma and everything, the bad karma. And so it stretches back to that 1960 election. If they had not had, just think about this. If Joe Kennedy hadn't gotten those mafioso to help them win that election, Richard Nixon would have been president. Think about how that would have changed history, for sure. And so, there's these times in history where one thing or another could have happened. We could have gone one way or another with the future of the country. And I'll bet if you go back to all the elections, you would have seen an awful lot of differences in terms of what had happened with the U.S. if the election outcome had been different than it was at the time.
Yeah, there's no doubt. The more that I'm sure you to concur, the more that I study and the more I find that I learn, the more I realize that I don't know hardly anything. And the one comment that I would make in regards to this so-called Kennedy curse, and certainly their involvement in the whiskey trade and perhaps maybe the House of Bourbon. I don't know how far back that goes. But the one thing that stuck out of my mind is actually the same source that I opened the discussion up with you today in regards to this theologian and some of the work that he's done, this Eric John Phelps. And he says that there's some of these societies, right? Some of these societies become corrupt and they're secretive and they have their networks and their connections and who knows really at the bottom line what they're doing and why they're doing it. But this is what Eric John Phelps says. He says a lot of this had to do with the fact of their involvement with a group called the Knights of Malta. So then I'm asking, okay, well, who were the Knights of Malta? What were they? What was Malta? What was the connection between Greece or maybe Malta being an island off the coast of Italy? How far back does this go? I don't know, Mark. I haven't gone that far. But certainly there are some of these old European powerful families, such as Orsini that I've spoken about recently, and even Medici. These are families that produce popes. These are very wealthy, very powerful families. How far back can we go? But that's my comment in regards to that. Maybe you have something.
Well, if you go, follow the money. Follow the money because many times that's what this is all about. It certainly is also about power. There's no question about that. The tug of war for power in our country right now is just, that's at the crux of everything. But it's also all about money because those powerful people. I mean, Joe Kennedy was a bad guy, as I put in the Poison Patriarch, and I even show more now with regard to his evil ways in Collateral Damage because. It was Bobby Kennedy and Joe Kennedy's abuse of power in 1961 and 62. The collateral damage of that is the deaths of Marilyn Monroe, JFK, and Dorothy Kilgallen. There's just no question about that. And I've been, really honored with people agreeing with those theories. Everybody doesn't, of course, but it's pretty much common sense. And so I've resolved 3 true crime murder mysteries, which really weren't mysteries at all. And I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I'm really not the greatest researcher in the world. But the truth was out there with regard to what happened to these 3 individuals. And yet, for whatever reason, people just, they just ignored the real evidence that was there. And so today we have those distortions of history. And we have Dorothy Kilgallen and Marilyn Monroe's reputation still ruined, that Marilyn committed suicide, which she did not, and Dorothy died as a drug addict, which she didn't. And so I'm going to continue to work as hard as I can to get justice for these 2 women and JFK as well.
Mark, thank you very much for your work, and thank you for joining the program. I want you to take a minute and leave listeners with some final thoughts. What you'd like them to walk away with this episode.
Well, again, just ask questions and watch for distortions of history. Watch for people who are, saying things that really can't be corroborated, and they're doing that for their own motive. And I wanted to also say, many of the evidence that's in my books, including Collateral Damage, comes from listeners and viewers of my interviews or presentations. So you can go to Mark Shaw Books and find me there to get in touch, or it's mshaw@yahoo.com. Please get in touch with me. I answer every single email that I get. And I welcome, criticism if that's what you want to do, or at least if you know something that you think will help me with my research, please get in touch with me.
Mark, thank you very much. Pleasure speaking with you again. Until next time, I'll be looking forward to it.
All right. Take care of yourself. You're a good man. I appreciate it, Ian. Bye-bye.
There's Mark Shaw, ladies and gentlemen. And look, I mean, yeah, he's very, very humble. He's been joining the show. October is what I found. October 2017. I started this show officially in January of 2017. I think it may have been, I have to look and see what the first Wednesday was. The first Wednesday of that month is the new year, just after the new year. And I think I picked Kitty up wherever she is. She might be in Miami. I don't know where she is. I think I picked her up in a lift in November of that month. Anyway, Mark Shaw. This is a guy that crosses his T's, dots his I's. He does phenomenal work. He simply just does great work, and as you can see, he means business. He's meeting with the right peoples. He's filing lawsuits where he needs to file lawsuits. He's an attorney, right by trade. That's what he is, and he's very good at it. And he's obviously given some great commentary on some pretty key cases in modern history of this country. So, ask questions. Keep asking questions. Buy his book. Get out there now and look at what he's doing. Support him. This is where we're at, folks. The United States. This is where we're at. It's up to us. It's up to you as a listener. It's up to me. It's up to each and every one of us to keep this country moving along as a beacon of freedom for all. But that means, as I've already mentioned, that means demanding transparency. That means holding these politicians up to a high standard, taking these folks to task. They work for us. Don't you ever think otherwise. These people represent and work for us. And if they are not representing your interests, you make your voice heard. Make your voice heard. Make it clear how you feel. And if they are not representing you, then they need to learn how to. I'll be back in a few moments. We're going to bring on Dr. McCullough, Peter McCullough here at the 30-minute mark. We've just crossed that top of the hour, so it is over 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard. I'll take a few moments here. I'll let, if you're listening live, I'll let whatever is on deck to run. It's a past episode. I keep them running on the website 24/7. So you can listen to people like Charlotte Eisebet, for instance. Charlotte Eisebet, you're talking about education system. She wrote an incredible book that exposed the corruption in the education system. What kind of beast? Right? Let's look at it from that point of view. What kind of beast would want to disrupt? I mean, folks, is it just blatant imperfection, greed, incoherence of the human being that causes these things? Yeah, possibly. But is there also possibly another machine? Is there also possibly another highly sophisticated, well-oiled mechanism? And if you talk to Brigadier General Robert Spalding, who joined this show over a year ago, he says, Ian, the United States has been invaded by a stealth enemy. Is it the Chinese? I contend no, folks. It's not the Chinese. The Chinese have not invaded. It is a system, it is a banking system, is what I contend, that controls the Chinese. Yes, post-World War II, the Chinese adopted a central bank, 1945, the same year the United Nations was adopted. There is a central bank out of Europe that, to my understanding, and you may prove me wrong if I am incorrect, this central banking system out of Switzerland, Basel, the mechanics, there might be more elements involved, the International Monetary Fund, that sort of thing, but the Bank of International Settlements, Basel, typically on a grand scale, from my understanding, and may be wrong, it basically regulates all central banks that feed into it. That includes Russia, and certainly includes the Federal Reserve Central Bank of the United States. So, what does freedom mean to you? Well, don't take it for granted, is what I'm saying. Don't take it for granted. Don't take it for granted the fact that you're able to listen to a voice like me, or you're able to read the work of Mark Shaw, or listen to his voice. Don't take this for granted. Do not take it for granted. We'll be back in a few moments. Folks, thanks for listening. Pass the work on, and be awesome. Be right back with you. Peter McCullough in about 25 minutes.